Hey guys, tonight we're going to leave our warm beds, our well-stocked fridges, and our delivery apps behind and travel back to a time when your next meal was not only uncertain, but almost certainly terrible. Imagine for a moment the worst meal you've ever had. Maybe it was a suspiciously grey-looking airline chicken, or a burger from a gas station that you knew even as you bought it was a profound mistake. Now imagine eating a far worse version of that meal every single day for your entire life. That is where we are heading, and let's be honest, faced with the daily reality of this menu, you probably won't survive this. The sheer nutritional bankruptcy and filth would send a modern immune system into a panic from which it would never recover. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a quiet, simple way to support the channel, and in the comments below, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always find it fascinating to see our little community stretching across the globe, sharing this quiet moment. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world has shrunk to the size of this room. It's a single cramped space, what historians would call a peasant's crock house. The walls are a rough mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung known as wela and daub, clinging to a crude wooden frame. There are no windows, only a couple of small shuttered openings that let in either a sliver of grey light or a blast of frigid air, but never both in moderation. The floor is just packed earth, damp and cold under your thin leather turnshoes. The air is thick, a permanent fog of wood smoke from the open hearth in the centre of the room. It stings your eyes and coats the back of your throat. A constant acrid taste you've known since birth. This smoke is your only defence against the swarms of insects that live in the thatched roof above you, and it's a trade-off you accept without a second thought. In the middle of this smoky, dim reality hangs the single most important object in your life. The great black cast-iron cauldron. It dangles from a hook over the low smouldering fire, the silent, soot-stained god around which your entire existence orbits. It is your family's stomach, its furnace, and its clock. Your day begins when something is added to it, and ends when you take your meagre portion from it. This pot is never empty. It is never scrubbed clean. It is a living, breathing, simmering entity, a continuous cycle of sustenance and survival. And what's inside, you ask? You already know. You've known every day of your life is pottage. Don't imagine a hearty, flavourful stew. Erase from your mind any notion of a chunky vegetable soup or a creamy porridge. This is the ancestor of those dishes, but it's a grim, primordial version. The base of your pottage is whatever grain you manage to grow on your small strip of land, grudgingly allocated to you by the lord of the manor. It's usually oats or barley coarsely milled into a rough grit. Sometimes when the harvest is poor, it's just the sweepings from the mill floor, a dusty mix of grain, chaff, and whatever else was lying around. This grit is tossed into the pot with water dipped from a nearby stream. The same stream where the villagers' animals drink and relieve themselves. Into this watery grey gruel go the vegetables from your tuft, the small garden plot next to your hut. You throw in whatever is available, a handful of wrinkled peas, a tough-stalked leek, the outer leaves of a cabbage, and a few small woody turnips. Nothing is peeled, nothing is chopped with any care. The dirt still clinging to the roots just adds to the texture. Familiar grit between your teeth. This isn't the farm-to-table experience that modern foodies romanticize. This is a desperate attempt to add bulk and stave off the gnawing emptiness in your belly for a few more hours. Sometimes you might get lucky. You might find a few wild herbs like nettles or dandelion greens while gathering firewood. You toss them in not for a burst of bright herbaceous flavour, but for the vague bitter greenness that momentarily cuts through the monotony. Historians still argue whether the contents of the peasant's cottage pot varied significantly by season, or if it remained a depressingly consistent gruel year-round. While summer might offer more greens and autumn more root vegetables, the fundamental character of the dish, a bland, gritty brownish sludge, remains unchanged. This is what's known as a perpetual stew. The pot is never fully scraped out. You eat your evening meal, and whatever remains becomes the base for tomorrow. In the morning, you'll add more water, another handful of oats, and maybe a wilted carrot. The flavours, such as they are, just layer and mingle over days, weeks, and even months. It's the original slow cooker, except the goal isn't to develop deep, complex flavours. It's to prevent the absolute disaster of an empty pot. You are in effect eating a soup that contains the ghosts of last month's meals. It's a sobering thought. A little bit of that sour cabbage from 3 weeks ago is probably in the spoonful you're about to eat right now. The taste is, well, taste is a generous word. It is overwhelmingly soul-crushing and soul-crushingly bland. The primary flavour is of damp grain with an undertone of earth and smoke. Sometimes if it has been simmering for too long, or the weather is warm, it takes on a slightly sour, fermented tang. The texture is the worst part. It's a grainy, lumpy slurry like a watery cement mix or wallpaper paste. It's thin one day, a thick spoon standing in sludge the next. You don't chew it so much as you just process it. You swallow it down, feeling the lukewarm mass slide down your esophagus and settle heavily in your stomach. It's not food as you or I would understand it. It is fuel. It is the barest minimum required to give you the energy to get up tomorrow and work in the fields from sun-up to sundown, which will in turn provide you with the grain to make more of this exact same pottage. The cycle is as inescapable as the mud on your floor and the smoke in your lungs. It is your life simmering in a pot. You lift a spoonful of the lukewarm pottage to your lips, but the act is incomplete. It's too thin, too unsatisfying on its own. Your other hand reaches for the second and arguably more important component of your meal. It sits on the rough-hewn table beside your wooden bowl, a hunk of bread. But again, you must dismiss any modern image your mind conjures. This is not a crusty sourdough, a fluffy brioche, or even a simple wholesome whole wheat loaf. What you have is a wedge hacked from a dense, dark, heavy round. It's less of a loaf and more of a geological specimen, a brownish-grey disk of compressed gloom. This is the bread of your daily life, and it is a sorrowful thing indeed. Its official name might be maslin bread, a common type made from a mixture of wheat and rye grown together in the same field, a medieval farmer's clever hedge against one crop or the other failing. More often, though, especially in leaner times or farther north, it's made purely from rye or even barley. The flour isn't the soft, powdery dust, you know. It's a coarse, gritty meal full of bran and bits of husk. The colour is as dismal grey-brown. The texture is dense and close-crumbed, and it carries a distinctly sour, earthy taste that you've long since stopped noticing. It is in every sense the polar opposite of the Lord's bread. You've seen that before on feast days carried up to the great house. It's called man-cheek bread, and it's made from the finest sifted wheat flour. rendering it shockingly, brilliantly white. It looks as soft as a cloud, a different species of food entirely. Your bread is not a cloud. Your bread is a fist-sized rock. You don't have an oven in your one-room hovel. A private oven is a luxury you cannot even conceive of. Like everyone else in the village, you're bound by law to use the Lord's communal oven. This is a mainstream historical fact known as a banality or feudal due. The Lord builds and maintains the oven, and in return you must pay a fee to use it, often in the form of a portion of your dough. So once a week, if you're lucky, or maybe once every 2 weeks if you're not, your mother or wife would have made the journey to the village baker carrying the family's dough. This infrequency means your bread is designed for longevity, not pleasure. The loaf you're eating right now could be 10 days old. Fresh bread is a memory that lasts for about a day before it begins its inevitable transformation into a brick. This is where things get truly grim. The bread itself is already a nutritional powerhouse of sadness, but it often contains more than just flour, water, and starter. Historians debate just how widespread the most egregious forms of adulteration were, but personal accounts and court records from the period make it clear that it was a constant fear and a frequent reality. Everyone in the chain, from the miller to the baker, was looking to stretch their profits. Your precious grain taken to the mill might come back lighter than it should, with the miller having taken more than his fair share to make up the weight or to bulk out the flour. All sorts of unsavoury things could be added. Fine sand, chalk dust, clay and sawdust from the mill floor. All of these could be mixed into the flour. Sometimes cheaper fillers like dried and ground peas or beans were used, which were at least edible if not exactly what you'd paid for. The result is sitting in your hand. You can feel it as you chew. There's a persistent low-level grit. It's a texture you're so used to. You barely register it consciously, but your teeth do. By the time you're 30, your teeth will likely be worn down, flattened by years of grinding, not just coarse sand, but literal sand. A toothache for you is not an inconvenience. It's a potential death sentence, and if you're unlucky enough to get a loaf with a higher concentration of filler, you'll feel it in your gut. A heavy, indigestible knot that offers bulk but no nutrition. It's the ultimate culinary scam. Food that makes you feel full while quietly starving you. You could probably build a wall with this stuff, and some days it feels like that's what's happening in your intestines, because the loaf is so old and hard you can't simply bite into it. You use your knife, the same all-purpose knife you use for mending tools and cleaning your fingernails, to saw off a piece. Then you plunge the hunk of bread into your bowl of pottage, holding it there until it softens. It soaks up the thin, greasy liquid, turning into a sodden, heavy sponge. This is how you eat it. This is how you make the bread and the pottage into a single cohesive meal of brownish-grey mush. The flavours, the sourness of the rye and the blandness of the gruel merge into the singular taste of survival. You eat slowly, methodically, working the gritty, soggy mass around in your mouth before swallowing. There's a strange and quirky tidbit from the time about how you define your social status by your bread. The whiter and finer the bread, the closer you were to God and the king. Your dark, heavy loaf marks you, defines you, and keeps you in your place. It is the perfect symbol of your life. It is hard. It is monotonous. It is full of hidden grit that wears you down day by day, and you must be grateful to have it all, because as bad as this bread is, the only thing worse is no bread, and that is a terror you will soon come to know. The last of the sodden bread and pottage settles in your stomach, a familiar, heavy weight. But it's a weight that brings no comfort tonight, because you are acutely aware of how little is left. The sack of mixed grain in the corner of your hut, which seemed reassuringly full after the autumn harvest, now sags, loose and pathetic. The remaining salted fish in the barrel are few and leathery, and the last of the dried peas have been scooped from the bottom of their sack. You're entering the most feared time of the year, a period known to agricultural historians and more intimately to you as the Hungry Gap. This is the grim interval of late spring and early summer, roughly from May to late June or even July. It is a cruel paradox. Outside, the world is bursting with new life. The days are growing longer, the fields are turning a vibrant green with new shoots of wheat and barley, and the birds are singing in the hedgerows. But for you, this explosion of life is a form of torture. It is a promise of food that is still weeks or even months away. The bounty of nature is visible, but it is not yet edible. The new crops are too young to harvest, and last year's food stores are, to put it simply, gone. The terror of the Hungry Gap is not a sudden dramatic event. It's a slow, creeping dread that begins in the dead of winter and builds with each passing week. You've been rationing for months, cutting the daily portion of the pottage and making the bread with more filler and less flour. Now the rationing has reached its crisis point. Your meals, which were already meagre, have become ghosts of their former selves. The pottage is now little more than brownish water with a few stray grains and a single lonely turnip floating sadly in the pot. Your stomach, which has known a low-level ache for months, now clenches with a sharp, insistent pain. You see the effects everywhere. The village, usually a place of quiet, rhythmic work, has become subdued. People move more slowly, their faces gaunt and pale. The usual chatter and laughter of children is gone, replaced by a fretful silence. You look at your own children, their limbs thin, their bellies starting to swell slightly, a telltale sign of severe malnutrition. Their usual energy has evaporated, leaving them listless and quiet. It is a quiet that terrifies you more than any scream. You feel a constant low-grade dizziness when you stand up too quickly from working your strip of land. Your own body is starting to consume itself. A mainstream historical fact of this period is the sheer vulnerability of the food supply. There was no global network, no refrigerated transport, and no way to import food from a region that had a surplus. You were entirely dependent on what your village could produce and successfully store. A single bad harvest caused by too much rain, or a prolonged drought, was a catastrophe. A blight on the crops, or a disease that swept through the precious livestock could tip the entire community into a famine. The Little Ice Age, a period of climatic cooling that began in the 14th century, made these bad harvests far more frequent, turning the annual Hungry Gap into a recurring nightmare of potential starvation. Your waking hours become a desperate, endless calculation of calories. You find yourself staring at things you would never normally consider food: the leather of your shoes, the straw in the thatch. You chew on a twig of willow bark, not for nutrition, but for the bitter distraction it provides. The hunger is a physical presence, a hollow ache that gnaws at your insides and fogs your mind. It makes it hard to think, hard to sleep, and hard to do anything but obsess over the emptiness. There's a quirky and sad little detail from this time, the June sickness. While not a formal medical term, peasants spoke of a particular listlessness and illness that befell them in early summer. It was quite simply the physical manifestation of prolonged severe hunger. Their immune systems were compromised, making them susceptible to any passing disease. A simple cold, which you might have shaken off in the autumn, could now blossom into a fatal pneumonia. A small cut sustained while working with a tool could become infected and lead to a slow, agonizing death. Your body, starved of fuel, has no resources left to fight. The lord of the manor and his family are, of course, immune to this. They have a dovecote providing a year-round supply of tender young birds. They have fish ponds stocked with carp and tench. Their granary is vast and well protected. It contents saved for them and their retainers. You see the smoke rising from the chimney of the manor house kitchen, and you know that up there they are eating. They are not just surviving, they are dining. The injustice of it is a sharp, bitter pill. But you're too weak, too consumed by your own family's plight to feel the anger fully. The hunger smothers everything else. Historians still argue about the precise mortality rates during a normal hungry gap. But it's clear that the elderly and the very young were the first to perish. You look at your aging father, his breath growing shallow, and at your youngest child, and you feel a cold wave of despair wash over you. The green shoots in the field are a race against time, and it's a race you're not sure you can win. The simmering pot is almost empty. The gnawing ache in your stomach has become a constant companion, a dull fire that dictates your every thought and action. The hungry gap has tightened its grip, and the meagre rations of pottage and gritty bread are a distant memory. Survival now depends on what you can find, what you can glean from the edges of the cultivated world. Your focus shifts from the empty hut to the vast, intimidating expanse that borders your village, the woods. The forest is a place of deep ambiguity. It is the Lord's domain, a jealously guarded resource, but it is also a place of potential sustenance, a wild larder that could mean the difference between life and death. And so you become a forager. You trudge out at dawn with a rough burlap sack and a desperate hope, your eyes scanning the ground, the bushes and the trees. This isn't a pleasant ramble in the woods. The gentle communion with nature. This is a high-stakes treasure hunt where the treasure is a handful of calories and the penalty for failure is starvation. Your first targets are the familiar, the safe bets. You gather nettles, carefully pinching the stinging leaves with a piece of cloth. Boiled for a long time in the pottage pot, they lose their sting and provide a welcome, if slightly bitter, green bulk. You dig for the roots of dandelions, tough and earthy, and gather their bitter leaves for a salad. A grim medieval version of a salad, likely undressed and tasting of dirt. You look for wild garlic, a plant whose pungent flavour is a shocking and welcome explosion in a world of blandness. These are the easy wins, the low-hanging fruit of the foraging world. But they are not enough. They are wisps of nutrition, not the substantial food your body craves. So you have to go deeper and look harder. You start digging for roots you've only heard about from your grandmother. You search for pig nuts, small nutty tubers that are delicious and nutritious, but maddeningly difficult to find. You have to trace their thin, delicate stems down into the earth, carefully digging around them with a stick or your bare hands, hoping to unearth the small brown prize. Finding one is a moment of triumph, but it's a tiny victory. You'd need to find 100 to make a meal. This is where the danger truly begins. The line between an edible plant and a deadly poison is terrifyingly thin. This is a fundamental historical truth of foraging. Desperation breeds carelessness. You look for what you hope are wild parsnips, but they bear a striking resemblance to hemlock water dropwort, a plant so notoriously toxic it earned the nickname hemlock. A single root of this plant contains enough poison to kill a cow, and its toxins induce a horrifying death, starting with a witch-like grin on the victim's face, a phenomenon known as a sardonic smile. You've heard the stories. Someone in the next village, a whole family wiped out after making a pottage with the wrong white root. Every mushroom is a gamble. You know a few of the safe ones, the big obvious field mushrooms that grow in the common pasture. But in the dim, damp light of the woods, 100 other varieties sprout from the leaf litter. Some are a gift of rich, savoury flavour. Others will make you violently ill for days, wasting precious calories you don't have. And a few, like the deceptively beautiful destroying angel or the death cap, will kill you. The death is a particularly cruel one. After eating it, you'll feel fine for a day, maybe even 2. Then the violent stomach cramps begin. But by then, it's too late. The toxins have already destroyed your liver and kidneys, and you're doomed to a slow, agonizing demise. You stare at a cluster of pale mushrooms. Your stomach is roaring with hunger, and you have to make a choice. Is it worth the risk? Historians still argue about how much botanical knowledge the average peasant truly possessed. Was it a rich inherited wisdom passed down through generations, or a haphazard collection of folklore and risky guesswork? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. You know some things for certain, but the edges are blurry, and he and the hunger make you willing to gamble in those blurry areas. You might use folk methods to test a plant, like rubbing it on your skin to see if it irritates, or tasting a minuscule amount to check for a burning or bitter taste. But these methods are unreliable, more superstition than science. A quirky and rather grim tidbit from this era is the concept of a full hope meal. This was a meal made from the most questionable, borderline edible things you could find. Bitter acorns that required days of leaching and running water to remove their tannins. Tough tree bark that could be ground into a flour-like substance, even mosses and lichens. These were foods of last resort, things that offered the faintest glimmer of survival when all else had failed. They would fill your belly, but they would tear up your insides, offering little to no real nutrition. It was a way to trick your body into feeling full while you continue to waste away. You return to your hut as dusk falls, your sack heavy, but not with treasure. It holds a collection of wilted greens, a few muddy roots that you pray are the right kind, and a handful of sour, unripe wild berries that will set your teeth on edge. You empty the contents into the pottage pot, adding water from the stream. As it heats, a thin, swampy-smelling soup begins to form. You watch it bubble, the unidentified leaves and roots swirling in the murky water. You know that this meal could save you, or it could kill you. You're so hungry, you no longer care which. You just need to eat. The thin forage soup from last night did not kill you, but it has not nourished you either. The hunger is a physical beast now clawing at your insides. It hollows out your thoughts, leaving only one primal, overwhelming desire for meat. Your body craves the density, the fat, the iron, and the sheer life-giving substance of it. You can almost taste it, a rich, savoury memory that feels more like a dream. But this is a dream you're not allowed to have because the most readily available source of meat, the creatures teeming in the woods and fields around you, is utterly forbidden. You stand at the edge of your small strip of land, looking towards the great forest. You can see a flicker of movement, a deer stepping gracefully between the trees. In the distance, you hear the grunt of a wild boar. The air is alive with rabbits, squirrels, and pheasants. To your modern mind, this is a landscape of opportunity, a free-range butcher shop. To you, a medieval peasant, it is a landscape of temptation and terror. For you, the act of hunting is not a sport or a pastime. It is a crime called poaching, and the penalty is not a fine or a slap on the wrist. It is mutilation or death. This is the reality of the forest law, a set of brutal legal codes established in England by the Norman kings, most famously William the Conqueror. This historical fact is central to understanding the peasants' plight. The forests were not public land. They were the king's personal pantry and playground. He and the nobles he granted rights to were the only ones permitted to hunt the beasts of the chase, primarily deer, but also wild boar, wolves, and foxes. To enforce this, vast swathes of England were designated as royal forests, areas subject not to common law, but to this separate draconian legal system. A royal forest wasn't just woods. It could include villages, fields, and entire communities, all living under this oppressive jurisdiction. The punishments were designed to be a terrifying deterrent. If you were caught hunting a deer, you could be blinded. You could have your hands or feet chopped off. For repeat offences, or for killing a stag, the penalty was often hanging. Even lesser offences carried severe consequences. Cutting down a tree for firewood in the royal forest could get you flogged. Owning a dog that was large enough to potentially chase a deer was illegal, unless you had it lauded or expedited. A charming process where 3 claws were cut off one of the dog's front paws, rendering it incapable of running at speed. The message was clear. Everything in the forest belongs to the Lord, and you will pay with your body if you try to take it. You feel this law in your bones. It keeps you weak. It keeps you compliant. The Lord and his guests will ride out on a great hunt with dozens of men, a pack of baying hounds, and a festive air. They will slaughter more deer in an afternoon than you could eat in a lifetime. They do it for sport, for the thrill of the chase, and for the status of presenting a magnificent roast at their feast. You do it, or dream of doing it, simply to feed your starving children. The injustice is as sharp and clear as a shard of glass, so you resort to the shadows. You become a creature of the night, a silent, desperate thief. You can't hunt deer. The risk is too great. The animal is too large to hide. You focus on the small fry, what was contemptuously called vermin by the nobility. You learn to set snares. Using a bit of twine or a carefully bent sapling, you fashion a small, subtle loop, placing it on a known rabbit run. It's delicate art. The snare must be perfectly positioned, perfectly tensioned. You check these snares in the pre-dawn gloom, your heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Most days the snare is empty, or it has been sprung by a leaf. But one morning you find it, a rabbit, its neck caught tight in the loop. The surge of triumph is immediately followed by a wave of pure terror. You're now in possession of illegal goods. You quickly kill the animal, wringing its neck with practiced efficiency, and shove it into your tunic. Every shadow seems to hold a forester, the Lord's warden, whose job it is to catch people like you. The walk back to your hut is the longest journey of your life. You feel the rabbit's cooling body against your skin, a damning life-giving weight. There's a quirky and fringe belief among some historians that a whole subculture of poaching signs and signals existed. A certain branch lay across a path, a particular knot tied in the grass. These could have been messages between poachers, warning of patrols or indicating a good spot. Whether this is romantic folklore, like the tales of Robin Hood, or a reflection of a hidden reality, remains a topic of scholarly debate. For you, there is no band of merry men. There is only you, alone and terrified. Back in the hut, the atmosphere is thick with conspiracy. You skin the rabbit quickly, the movement swift and furtive. Every part of it must be used, and all evidence must be destroyed. The skin will be burned in the fire late at night when the smoke won't be noticed. The guts will be buried deep in the garden. The meat itself, a pathetic amount once divided among your family, is the greatest risk. You can't just roast it. The smell of cooking meat would travel. An aromatic advertisement of your crime. It must be chopped into tiny pieces and thrown into the perpetual pottage pot. Its flavour and substance are disguised by the familiar murky grill. As you eat the pottage that night, you search for the tiny morsels of rabbit. Each small piece of meat is a jewel, a burst of flavour and strength in a sea of blandness. It feels like a sacrament, a holy communion of defiance. You watch your children eat, seeing a flicker of life return to their eyes, and you know with absolute certainty that you will do it again. You will risk blindness and death, not for riches or glory, but for the taste of meat and the survival of your family. The illicit rabbit, now just a memory, gave you a momentary surge of strength, but it did nothing to solve the other fundamental problem of your daily consumption: what to drink. You're constantly naggingly thirsty. The physical labour in the fields, the salty preserved foods that make up what little variety you have, and the simple need of your body for hydration create a constant demand. But quenching that thirst is one of the most dangerous things you can do. You walk to the communal village well, or more likely to the nearby stream that runs past the edge of your settlement. You lower a wooden bucket into the water. As you pull it up, you try not to look too closely at what's floating in it. The water has a brownish tint and a faint, unpleasant smell. You know exactly why this stream is not a pristine bubbling brook. It is the village's all-purpose utility channel. Upstream, families wash their filthy clothes in it. The village tanner a few hundred yards away scrapes hides and dumps the foul-smelling, chemical-laden wastewater into the current. The local butcher, when there is an animal to be slaughtered, rinses the blood and offal into the same stream, and most significantly it serves as the de facto sewer for both human and animal waste. The concept of sanitation is utterly alien. Your village has no sewage system. People relieve themselves in cesspits dug near their homes, which frequently overflow during heavy rains, leaching their contents into the ground and eventually into the water table in the stream. Animals wander freely, defecating wherever they please. All of this biological waste teeming with bacteria like E. coli, salmonella, and the microbes that cause cholera and typhoid is concentrated in your only water source. To a modern person, a single cup of this water would be a biological time bomb, a guaranteed trip to the emergency room. For you, it's just water. You know, on a gut level, that this water is not good. You've seen what happens. People, especially infants and the elderly, are frequently struck down by what you call the flux or dysentery. It's a terrifying illness that causes violent stomach cramps, fever, and a bloody, watery diarrhea that drains the life from a person in a matter of days. You don't understand the germ theory of disease. That's a scientific revolution still centuries away. You attribute it to bad air, an imbalance of your bodily humours, or the wrath of God. But you do make the connection. Drinking too much of the water, especially in the hot summer months when the stream is low and stagnant, often leads to sickness. So what is the alternative? The answer is on your table in a large earthenware jug. Ale. Or to be more specific, small ale. This is the ubiquitous drink of your time, consumed by men, women, and even children from morning till night. And here we arrive at a classic mainstream historical fact that is often misunderstood. You don't drink ale primarily to get drunk. You drink it because it is paradoxically safer than the water. The process of making ale involves boiling the water, which, unbeknownst to you, kills most of the harmful pathogens. The fermentation process, where yeast converts sugars into alcohol, further inhibits the growth of bacteria. The result is a beverage that is far less likely to give you a fatal case of the flux. But let's be clear about what this ale is. It is not the strong, flavourful, hoppy craft beer you might know today. Hops, which act as a preservative and add that characteristic bitter flavour, were not widely used in English brewing until the 15th century. Your ale is an unhopped fermented grain beverage. It's made from barley, oats or wheat, and it tastes good. It tastes like fizzy liquid bread. It's cloudy, yeasty, and has a slightly sour tang. The small ale that is your daily drink is the product of a second or even third rinsing of the grain mash, making it very low in alcohol, probably around 12% ABV, perhaps even less. It's just alcoholic enough to be safe, but not so strong that you can't drink it all day while working in the fields. A stronger, more flavourful ale would be reserved for holidays and special occasions. The production of this ale is a cornerstone of village life, and it's almost entirely the domain of women. The alewife, or brewster, was a common figure in every village. She would brew batches of ale in her home, and when it was ready, she would signal that it was for sale by placing a broom or a decorated pole and ale stake over her door. This quirky tidbit is considered by some to be a distant ancestor of the modern pub sign. The quality of ale could vary wildly from one brewer to the next, and a bad batch could be a source of village-wide grumbling. Historians still argue about the true nutritional value of this medieval ale. Some contend it was a vital source of calories and B vitamins, a true liquid bread that helped peasants endure their physically demanding lives. Others argue that its nutritional contribution was minimal, and its primary role was simply that of a safe hydrator. For you, the debate is academic. It is what you have. You start your day with a mug of it. Oh, you carry a flask of it out to the fields, and you drink it with your evening meal. It is wet. It is safe, and it provides a dulling caloric comfort that water simply cannot. Your children drink it too. From a young age they are given watered-down small ale instead of the dangerous water from the stream. This practice, while shocking to modern sensibilities, was a logical act of parental care. It was far better for a child to be slightly perpetually sedated by a low-alcohol drink than to die of dehydration from dysentery. So you drink your sour, cloudy ale, and you're grateful for it. It is one of the few things in your life that you can consume without the fear of immediate violent illness. It is your shield against the invisible poisons lurking in the well. For weeks, the village has been buzzing with a low, hopeful murmur. Sleep now. Let yourself sink deeper into that perfect relaxation. Your eyelids are heavy. So heavy it would take too much effort to open them now. Your limbs feel pleasantly weighted, impossible to move even if you wanted to, which you don't. You just want to drift all the way down into deep, restful sleep. That's it. Just let go completely. The day is done. The work is finished. Nothing more required of you now except to rest, to renew, to dream perhaps of different possibilities, different worlds. But for now, just sleep deep and peaceful, easy and calm. Sleep now, sleep well, drifting deeper with each breath down and down into perfect, complete rest.